And so, it caught my eye that a few days ago, Stuart Mandel of The Athletic came out with his post-spring top 25, and he put Utah and notably Oregon ahead of USC. And of course, now at the Pac-12 championship game is a top 2 contest. If you have USC third, well, that means USC's out on the outside looking in. And I'm not really even here to say that Mandel is wrong, but just what struck me about his thought process, if you read his article at The Athletic, and of course, we link to it at Trojans Wire, he focuses on, he acknowledges the weakness and the lack of depth on defense and that's going to be a problem. So, he acknowledges that point. Like, that's my big concern with USC when I evaluate the Trojans. But Mandel takes a little bit of time to say, there have been so many moving parts on the roster. He's trying to dramatically reassemble USC in the portal with all these moving pieces and without an established culture. It's a lot to expect all of it to come together in a year. Again, not here to dump on Mandel. It's a perfectly reasonable line of thought. It's just striking that he focuses on this notion of impermanence. That, he doesn't have an established foundation, doesn't have an established roster from one year to the next. He's walking into a new situation and has overhauled the roster. It just strikes me as curious because we live in this transfer portal era now, and you have to use the transfer portal to upgrade your roster, especially if it has a lot of holes. And that's obviously something USC and Lincoln Riley have focused on this year. Next year they get their full recruiting cycle. So they're going to, rely more on the recruiting trail for 2023, whereas in 2022, it's an instant scramble, and they've needed to be very active in the portal. But even then, we are in the portal era. And so this notion of, well, I'm not so sure that USC is going to put all the pieces together because the roster's so different. Lots of programs are doing that. So, is that really all that convincing a reason to downgrade USC or express skepticism about USC? It's just weird. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's flawed. It's a curious line of argumentation given the era in which we exist right now. Now, 10 years ago, if you had made that same argument, I think it would contain more heft. It would be more natural to question a roster that looks so different from the previous year. But right now, this is what other coaches are doing. This is what Lane Kiffin's doing at Ole Miss. This is what other coaches who have found the need to be very active in the transfer portal are doing. We see college basketball teams reinvent themselves on the fly from one year to the next. So the notion that, well, you don't have an established roster, you don't have an established culture with your guys, it's just a weird argument to make. Not necessarily wrong, because I get the sense that, you don't have everything in place and you're kind of inheriting a new situation. It's just a unique point of emphasis that I find striking.
Matt, especially when the program that Mandel is elevating above USC is also experiencing a coaching transition. So it's not like they are the model of stability, and that has nothing to do with Dan Lanning's ability. That just has to do with the situation that they're in as well. It's a complete head coaching and coaching staff turnover, quarterback change as well. I think they've upgraded at the quarterback position, but it's still a different quarterback in play. And a level of instability, not because anything's wrong, but just because of a transition. And there you have it. Yeah, anytime I don't agree with somebody's perspective on something, you can, at least I put it in a few different categories. There are those folks that are just factually wrong. Whatever argument they're bringing to the table is just, okay, we can look that up. That's factually wrong. I'm disregarding your opinion on this just because it's factually wrong. And then there are certainly opinions out there that I just think are illogical. They haven't been thought through. They make no sense. And then you've got a third category where this is well thought out. This is reasonable. I understand it. it certainly could happen. I'm just not agreeing with your take on the situation. So,
yeah, I mean, there are nuances here. Like, if you had phrased it, if Mandel had phrased it as Lincoln Riley is trying to reassemble a very big operation, and he's trying to take a lot of steps all in one season, that he has a lot on his plate, and he's probably not going to accomplish everything that he wants to do, that's a little bit better than this notion of not having an established culture, because he is in the process of building this culture, and if the players are buying in, the idea that you didn't have an established culture last year under Clay Helton, and that therefore you're not going to have enough culture, enough belief, enough buy-in, whatever word or label you want to apply to that, in September and October. That I just don't get. Like, we see coaches all the time, pro and college sports, they walk into a messed up situation. Look at, the Golden State Warriors are about to make a 6th NBA Finals in 8 years. And of course, Klay Thompson was injured each of the last 2 years. So basically they're going to go 6 for 6 with a healthy Klay Thompson in the last 6 NBA seasons. That's a perfect example of they didn't have an established culture. Mark Jackson, we've seen, is a divisive figure. He even though he improved those Warriors in 2013 and 14, he certainly did not unlock the talents of that roster, Steph and Clay and Draymond Green. And then Steve Kerr comes in, instantly gets that thing fixed. He instantly maximized everyone in that locker room. So that's an example of how, okay, they didn't have the established culture. So what? They got the right guy. They found Steve Kerr to just put all the pieces together. That's exactly what USC is aiming for under Lincoln Riley. And of course, when you look at Lincoln Riley's track record, the idea that, whoa, this is going to be too hard for him doing all of this in 1 year, we're selling him a little short there. And I would just think that Stuart Mandel, who's been around the block, knows a lot more than I do about college football, I wish he'd just come out and say, hey, there's just serious deficiencies and limitations with this roster, instead of, well, you don't have an established culture. I mean, the culture can be there in one season. Golden State Warriors serving as an obvious example of that. Just focus on the defense and the lack of line depth. Like, that should be seen as the number one deficiency with USC. So, like, I'm not running away from that. I'm not pretending that flaw isn't there. It's a huge flaw. Just the lack of an established culture is just a very weird way to express skepticism about this particular USC season.